At the same time, we'll work with our NATO allies to seek bold reductions in U.S. and Russian tactical weapons in Europe. And we can forge a new international framework for peaceful nuclear power, reject the nuclear weaponization that North Korea and Iran may be seeking. America will host a summit in 2016 to continue our efforts to secure nuclear materials around the world, and we will work to build support in the United States to ratify the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and call on all nations to begin negotiations on a treaty that ends the production of fissile materials for nuclear weapons. These are steps we can take to create a world of peace with justice.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States speaking earlier today in Berlin. Welcome to the Steve Malzberg Show. And he called for a one-third unilateral reduction in the amount of nuclear weapons that the United States has as well. Joining us now to talk about all this is Bill Gertz, senior editor, Washington Free Beacon, Washington Times columnist. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Hey, Steve. Good to be on the program.
Well, always good to talk to you, sir. And we've talked about this in advance of today, several weeks ago, so we knew it was coming a long time ago, and so did listeners and viewers to this show. So what do you make of his speech as he was sweating through it there in Berlin?
Wow, it's somewhat of a radical departure from our nuclear deterrence posture, and could be very destabilizing and prompt a nuclear arms race by a lot of countries in the world. First of all, the president is using a new term to support his earlier disarmament call back in 2009 in Prague, and it's called Peace with Justice, which has a very Marxist-Leninist ring to it. You know, all of the rhetoric of the communist groups around refer to peace with justice. Now the president has employed it for the first time. They've issued, the president on Tuesday issued new guidance which limits the use of nuclear weapons in U.S. security strategy. And it states that they will only be used under extreme circumstances without specifying what that is. After we've been nuked by North Korea or Iran, it's not clear. The other thing is these appear to be unilateral cuts, as you mentioned, because almost as an afterthought, the president announced that, well, I've done this review. I've determined that we can have one-third fewer nuclear weapons than we plan to have under New START, which is 1,550, so
Right.
That brings us down to about 1,000. And then, oh, by the way, I intend to do this to seek these cuts with the Russians. But the whole setup for that makes no mention that this is going to be part of negotiations with the Russians. So it's like telling the Russians, hey, we're going to cut our arsenal. If you guys want to come along, that'd be nice.
Unbelievable, just unbelievable. And explain to the people exactly what peace with justice means, because I was going to ask you about that.
It's to me, I don't know. He hasn't elaborated, but to me, it's the kind of the antithesis of peace through strength, which was Ronald Reagan's byword,
Right?
Which was also, what George Washington used to say too. Peace with justice to me sounds like, he wants to give poor people money rather than spend it on nuclear weapons, which we need. We need these weapons because the Russians, as we discussed earlier, and as I wrote in the Newsmax piece, very dangerous world from my perspective.
And along those lines, Bill, you wrote a piece at the Washington Free Beacon, I believe today, talking about how the Al-Qaeda threat is actually growing, contrary to what our president keeps telling us.
Yes, this is counterterrorism officials and private experts are saying that Al-Qaeda is not on the path to defeat. Core Al-Qaeda may be, because the administration has focused all of its counterterrorism resources on trying to stop Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Well, guess what? They've moved on. They're going to Syria. They're going to North Africa. They're going to Somalia. They're going to all of the ungoverned spaces where there are no major efforts to use drones to strike these leaders. So we're facing a growing Al-Qaeda threat. It's the Al-Qaeda affiliate threat, I guess I would refer to it.
So when it comes to substance and that translating into real action, what Obama said today, he can do that unilaterally. I mean, not only the United States as a nation could cut their arsenal, certainly, but can he do it as president?
Yes. Now, Congress has already enacted, well, actually they passed in the defense bill a provision that prevents the Pentagon from spending any money to implement the START treaty unless the president certifies that, you know, the Russians aren't violating their arms agreements and other things. So Congress could step in and prevent this, although it would be very difficult. You really cannot change policy of the administration. You can control the purse strings, but it's very difficult to change policies. And to me, it's quite alarming that the military and the Pentagon went along with this. And apparently, there were some voices of dissent inside on this, and it's one of the reasons the president delayed this. He was supposed to announce this in January or February when there was the State of the Union, but then the North Koreans lit off one of their nuclear devices, and his advisors thought maybe it doesn't sound so good that we're cutting our arsenal when the North Koreans are lighting off nuclear.
Timing is kind of everything. But talking to Bill Gertz, one final point, FBI Director Mueller said today that drones are used to watch Americans on a very, very, I think he said two varies, minimal way. What do you make of that?
Well, it's been moving in that direction. Unmanned aircraft are being used as part of surveillance over a lot of areas, the borders, and now apparently they're using it in law enforcement. It's somewhat surprising. Yeah,
well, and maybe everybody went along with the cuts in the nuclear arsenal because everybody knows what phone calls and websites everybody visits, you know? You never know. Never say never. Bill.